Hey, Mickey, you look like you belong at some kind of like Hawaiian luau. I think we got a glitch, though. I mean, you got the sunglasses on and the cool outfit, but your headphone wire seems to have gotten tangled up. Okay, we got that problem solved.
Bob, is that you?
Yeah, I know. You can't.
I just woke up. We're not doing one this week, right?
Actually, we are. It was last week we took off, and as you may have noticed, we take 1 week off, and World War III almost breaks out in Taiwan.
Well, did something happen? I went to sleep, and I just woke up. Like, it's 2 weeks later?
I should describe you for the benefit of our...
I set the alarm wrong.
Our audio audience.
I set it for 2 weeks instead of 1 week.
So you got these Ray Charles sunglasses on. You got a Hawaiian luau shirt, and then you've grown a beard. You're growing a beard. What is that? Why?
It's not a beard, Bob.
What is it? Just whiskers?
It's like I don't know. It's like chin hair and a mustache.
Yeah, but you're clearly. It's oh my God, a Van Dyke.
Van Dykes look good on me.
It's a good look. No,
I've exhausted all other options.
I think it's an
improvement. Like growing hair on the top of my head. So
it's an improvement over the previous Mickey, and we'll just leave it at that.
Except the problem is it's white.
Well,
there's Grecian formula
that confers dignity, and frankly, you could use a little bit of
that. Already with the invective.
Sorry, it just kind of piled up. It piled up over the 2 weeks. I was for anybody who may have not even tried to check in last week. We weren't here. I was at a family reunion in Georgia, where sadly, the only of my siblings who didn't vote for Trump did not show up. So I was outnumbered 3-1.
Did they heap abuse on you?
No, we don't mention the subject at all. Wisely, we stay completely away. It was in Georgia in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I think, as I recall, when you drove through Kansas or something, you reported back that there was a lot of Christian rock on the radio. Did you, or am I imagining that? Anyway, I'm here to tell you.
There's a lot of Christian rock, and you could tell anytime they talk about him, it's either Christian rock or a wedding present song. And odds are it's going to be Christian rock. So you learn quickly, have a itchy trigger finger, but some of them it's pretty good. And the more insidious trend, which I think is abated, is they mix the Christian rock in with regular rock. So you don't really know you're in a Christian rock station.
Well, maybe it's just that the Christian rock assumes such subtle form, you don't realize it's Christian rock. Like, Debbie Boone's song, You Light Up My Life, Pat Boone,
right.
That turns out that was about God. Who knew?
Right, but the Christian rock songs are inevitably pompous, and they follow this horrible formula that becomes unlistenable after a while.
Pompous?
Even though it's very operatic.
Well, first of all, there's different genres. There's Christian hip hop, there's Christian country. I don't think you did enough scanning of the dial. I mean,
oh Jesus, okay,
it's all over the place.
I missed the Christian country.
If I could register a minor complaint about the Christian country station I listened to, there was some line about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These prophets are all gone. Excuse me, but those were not prophets. Those were not prophets. I mean, I don't want to say that you should really have read a whole lot of the Bible if you're going to write lyrics to country Western Christian songs, but...
Well, maybe he was making a leap and asserting that they were prophets.
Maybe.
A radical new interpretation of the Bible.
Would be radical.
It's better than bro country. That's all I could say.
Where is bro country?
And bro country came and went.
Oh, bro country music. I see.
Yeah.
You'd know better than I would.
Actually, it was championed by the rock critic for Slate.
Who was?
I forget his name. Jody somebody.
Oh.
Great guy. I forget his name. Anyway, well, things have happened.
It seems like everything has happened. A lot has happened. Kansas happened. Speaking of Kansas.
Kansas happened. Biden is the new Reagan, Bob. He's riding high.
Complete momentum shift.
Zawahiri had a complete momentum shift.
Isn't it interesting, though, how small that looms in the zeitgeist? I mean,
But that's because
Al-Qaeda.
Biden is piling victory on victory. It seems small in comparison with the other mountainous victories he's achieving.
They all blur together.
That's not your interpretation.
No, my interpretation is that the global war on terror is over. I mean, it should be over. It's not over. We're still fighting it in these various countries, but the people have moved on. I mean, that just didn't make much of a splash, right, in real life, or did it?
I don't think it did. Not as much as it would have made 5-10 years ago. Sure. Just to get to deal with to get Zawahiri out of the way. I mean, the interesting conspiracy theory, which was first broached by my friend John Ellis and then echoed by Steve Call, who's reported a lot on the region, is that the Taliban gave him up because they really need our help unfreezing these assets that we're holding unfairly, as you say. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, we have them over a barrel. So what do they care about Zawahiri? He's yesterday's news. So it's a little bizarre that they could take him out without any collateral damage.
He reads on his deck every day, apparently. Do you do that? You should quit if you do. Apparently, it's dangerous.
Well, there are a lot of things that are dangerous in Los Angeles, but they haven't gotten to missile attacks yet.
Hey, but speaking of which, you mark my word, some of the weapons we've sent to Ukraine, I mean, obviously a number of them are already on the black market. Mark my word, someday some of them will be found, like Stinger missiles or something, in the hands of extremists in America. Okay? Well, it's a long-term prediction, but I'd say within 3 years.
I don't understand why that hasn't happened yet. Stingers have been floating around Afghanistan for years. And you know, there are all sorts of long-distance munitions that aren't used. A Katyusha is, how far does that go? It goes pretty far. I never understood why somebody didn't wander by the White House with one of those things and blow out a few windows. It's the easiest thing in the world.
No, it will. I mean, we've sent a lot of stuff over there, and Ukraine, as Tom Friedman noted on my podcast this week, if you look at the corruption index put out by, what is it, Transparency International, whatever, Ukraine is almost up there with Russia. I mean, there is it is a democracy, yes, but there's a lot of corruption there. And I was just listening to a podcast with a journalist saying that, some of the weapons aren't even making it to Ukraine. They're hitting the black market on the Polish side of the border.
That was the hidden lead in Tom Friedman's piece attacking Hillary's trip to Taiwan, which is Pelosi's. Yeah, sorry, they all look alike. The attacking Pelosi's trip to Taiwan, which is that the administration has no faith in Zelensky. Apparently, it's the second time he has said that.
I tried to get him to elaborate in the podcast. He didn't, and then I stupidly failed after we had quit recording to say, Tom, off the record, can you tell me, what is the source of tension between Zelensky and the Biden administration? I'd love to know. I mean,
I would love to know. I can't think of anyone that would rise to the level of, being and obviously it can't just be Hunter Biden or minor corruption. It has to be something big.
No, the other thing, though, Tom said in that column in a consecutive paragraph is, he noted that Zelensky not long ago on the same day fired basically the equivalent of, I guess, the attorney general and the head of the CIA, and what's up with that? And I was glad to see Tom say in the column, there's not enough curiosity among American journalists about this kind of stuff. It's like as if we don't want to look under the hood.
That's for sure.
That was a good column and an important one. I think it got a ton of attention. And can I just the interesting point he made about the Pelosi trip, which I didn't know really, was that the Biden administration is worried that it might endanger China's forbearance so far in sending arms to Russia. He said that the Biden administration early on said to China, if you send weapons to Russia, it'll endanger your economic relations with the West. And so far, China had respected the wishes of the administration. Russia wanted drones from them and had to go to Iran instead. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there any evidence that China has started to renege on and started to arm Russia?
I haven't heard any, and that would have gotten our attention probably in a way that none of the many things they did do in retaliation have done. They've done a lot. I mean, they've done some sanctions on Taiwan, so the Taiwanese people are feeling this in some magnitude, I guess. China suspended cooperation on all these international fronts with the U.S., climate change.
Has anybody come up with a justification for the Pelosi visit that holds any water at all? It seems to me she obviously thinks she hasn't read the latest news. She thinks she's going to lose in the midterms, and this is her swan song, and she's finishing off her resume as opposed to her eulogy. I think legacy is the word that's come up. She's long been a human rights crusader in the context of China. She did a visit at the beginning of her congressional tenure. She did a visit to Beijing. She cares about the issue. And I think there's something of a constituency. I mean, what district is she from? She's from Northern Taiwan? I was thinking that, but it sort of denigrates her commitment. But I'm sure must be a lot of Chinese Americans in that district. And they wouldn't be left-wing Chinese Americans.
No, by and large, they would not, probably. So who knows? I don't know, but it just seems to me extremely irresponsible. I mean, I know separation of powers. Congress can do things it wants to do, but traditionally we leave diplomacy to the executive branch. And because of the kind of unique circumstances here, this was bound to be construed as an act of American.
Forget separation of powers; it just fuck things up. So why do something that fucks things up?
No, the idea that she would do this without, first asking for a green light with the Biden administration is amazing. I mean, people point out, well, Newt Gingrich did it. Well, yeah, but he didn't do it to a president of his own party against that president's wishes. He did it, as a way to troll Bill Clinton, among other things, probably. I mean, no responsible
Supposedly, but he did talk to Clinton before he went and negotiated the whole thing out, I think.
Did he really?
That's what Byron York said. I mean, maybe not the whole thing, but he, because, when he went to China first, the Chinese said, don't go to Taiwan. And he defied them. I don't know if he cleared that with Clinton, but but he did. He was. The Clinton administration didn't make the objections that the Biden administration apparently has made.
And I think one thing people don't realize is that, autocrats do care tremendously what their people think of them. They are, to some extent, captives of public opinion in the way that Democratic leaders are. Of course, they more repressively try to manipulate the public opinion, but I think they care about it every bit as much. And the fact is that Pelosi's visit pissed off a bunch of the Chinese people, and it's gonna make it harder for Xi Jinping, even if he wants to be cooperative with the U.S., do things on the Ukraine front that we like, and so on. It's just, I don't see any good coming out of this at all.
Well, you're not going to get an argument from me.
And I do think it makes invasion of Taiwan more likely. Last thing I want to say on that front is something I said in the piece in my Nonzero newsletter this week, which is just that, I think we're drawing the wrong lesson from Ukraine. Or at least we're not giving serious attention to the possibility that the lesson to draw from Ukraine is that if you start flooding a country with weapons, it will increase the chances of invasion, not decrease them. Because, if China starts thinking that this is just never going to end, They're going to think, well, if we ever are going to have to invade, we might as well do it now before it gets even worse. But the Biden administration and Washington generally seems to be drawing the opposite conclusion from Ukraine. Well, this is all the more reason to arm China. Well, okay, but we armed Ukraine and it did not deter an invasion.
Taiwan, you mean?
Yeah. In fact, this will be the last thing, but I dug this up from the New York Times. This is in May, and they're talking about how there's a big push now after the beginning of the Ukraine war to give Taiwan very much the kind of arms that succeeded in Ukraine in kind of repelling parts of the invasion, shoulder-fired missiles and so on. And here's a quote from the Times. The push by the Biden administration, that is to arm Taiwan, has broadened and accelerated similar efforts by officials in the Trump and Obama administration. Democratic and Republican officials and lawmakers say one lesson of the Ukraine war is the United States must help transform Taiwan into a, quote, porcupine to deter potential attacks from China. Wait a second. We did transform Ukraine into a, quote, porcupine. One thing that definitely didn't happen is deterring an attack. Now, it may have enabled them to better defend against the attack.
Putin may not have realized that it was a porcupine. He seems to have thought that it would be an easy, not a cakewalk, but that it would be a lot easier to take over Ukraine than it was.
Yeah, but also, I mean, his ambition, he tried something much more ambitious than anybody thought was kind of smart.
Right, it didn't work. So if he realized it was a porcupine, then he wouldn't have tried it.
Well, he would have confined his aspirations to the Donbass, probably. I think as long as we had, I think the ongoing NATOization of Ukraine, he was not going to put up with.
That it raises what to my mind is an interesting what if. You will probably dismiss it. Trump, during the Trump administration, we kept on arming Ukraine to the teeth, and so
we started it under Trump.
Okay,
Obama didn't do it. Oh yeah. And somewhat against his wishes. He wasn't enthusiastic. But
Trump or Obama?
Trump. Obama didn't do it. Obama consciously chose not to.
I thought we gave them something, but we didn't give them...
We gave them night vision goggles. We gave them helmets.
Didn't we do joint training of Ukraine troops and NATO troops and send their officers to Germany?
I don't think we gave them so much as rifles under Obama.
Yeah, okay. If Trump had been reelected, would Putin have invaded? Under your argument, the armaments are still there. You better stop it before it gets out of control.
Yeah, I think that logic would have applied, and I don't envision Trump doing what I think Biden should have done, which is negotiate seriously with Putin. I mean, he might have liked to, but he just kept caving to the blob. So I doubt he would have wound up doing the negotiating. Biden did specific things to antagonize Russia, like, sign a joint declaration with Ukraine of ongoing commitment to whatever that maybe Trump wouldn't have done. But I mean, Trump was just a creature. He was a slave to the blob, basically. And the blob didn't want serious negotiation.
Well, the Fiona Hill theory is that Putin would be scared that he was erratic and might do something crazy, which is certainly his modus operandi is to do something crazy on the theory that it might work. And sometimes it does work, as with the tariff threat against Mexico. But sometimes it's a complete disaster, as with the January 6th attempt to come up with these slates of electors. But throughout his life, he seems to be, trying crazy things to pull victory from the jaws of defeat.
Yeah, could be.
Anyway, the only interesting thing, I haven't read much on the status of the war in Ukraine. The only interesting thing I read is that Russia's foreign currency depends on their ability to sell oil, which means they have to have a lot of tankers going around the world at any given time. And those tankers are very vulnerable should somebody decide to sink them. And they're also hard to insure, and we control the insurance. Now, maybe Russia doesn't care about being insured since they're at war and they're a big country and they can eat the losses, but maybe not. But the argument was that this is another lever the West has over Russia, which is we can.
Whose tankers are they? Are they owned by the Russian government? If so, it can be completely indifferent.
No, I don't think they're owned by the Russian government. So we can sort of. I think the EU has already moved to say, yes, you can insure them, but you can't if the price of the oil is above a certain amount. So we're trying to use this lever to put a lid on the amount of money they can get.
I don't know, but I mean, why would we? So you're saying it would be a good idea to inhibit the transfer of Russian oil?
I don't know if it's a good idea, but it's a potential leverage point for people who do think it's a good idea.
But isn't inflation one of Biden's great fears? He's been bragging about how gas prices are going down.
If we effectively put a lid on the Russian prices, is that apparently this guy this is the guy who wrote this was the guy named I think Simon Johnson. He's not a foreign policy guy. He's a business guy. He claimed that they have been doing this and it has not affected the price of oil a bit.
They've been doing what though? I mean,
trying to put a cap on the price Russians can charge.
Oh, that. But I thought you were saying maybe I totally misunderstood you. You were saying either end the insurance for them or actually blow tankers up. You were just talking about ending the insurance for them.
We wouldn't blow tankers up, but that's what you would insure against, I guess.
Okay, but if removing insurance has an inhibiting effect on the flow of oil, that'll be inflationary.
Right, but at the moment it would just have a price control effect, which sometimes temporarily works in the short term, doesn't it?
I guess it could. I don't know. I mean,
we're trying it with prescription drugs. Why shouldn't it work with Russian oil?
Yeah, I don't know. I do know people are saying that the winter is going to get tough in terms of sustaining European support for this whole thing because they're really going to start feeling the energy crunch. I mean, as long as we're on the subject of Ukraine, the other thing I would say is that I should. There are some signs that after a few weeks of nothing much happening in the Donbass, that Russia is making some kind of progress around the town of Bakhmut. It's disputed how much there is. But if it turns out that they are making progress in the Donbass, that'll be kind of bad news in the sense that they'll be doing it notwithstanding the fact that they just transferred a bunch of troops from the Donbass and other places to the south to head up a feared counterattack on Kherson by Ukraine. So if they can do these two things at once, if we are about to see progress in this area, which is one of the gateways to the two big prizes in Donetsk Oblast, which are Kramatorsk and Sloviansk or something. Those are the two big cities. We'll see, but that would be bad news for Ukraine.
They're bringing in North Korean cannon fodder too.
Are they? You mean humans?
That was the latest story today. Yes.
Actual North Korean human beings?
Troops, yes.
The Russians are?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, they're pulling out all the stops to beef up their manpower without having to declare general mobilization and admit that this is actually a war. I don't know, but it doesn't look, I don't see any end in sight.
It's pretty impressive how, you mentioned Zawahiri being backburnered. The Ukraine war has sort of been backburnered too, in terms of what people are talking about. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think if we sort of lower the temperature and make it less of a titanic existential struggle against forces of autocracy defending Western Europe, that makes negotiation much more plausible.
Does it? I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, right now, it seems to me that the problem you face is that on the Ukrainian side, there's no apparent willingness to settle for anything approaching the status quo.
Maybe that's why the Biden administration is not happy with Zelensky.
Could be. I wonder. I would love to know.
Well, you had your chance, buddy.
I had my chance. I'm not sure he knows. I'm not sure Tom knows, but I did blow it. I mean, I asked him on camera, but I definitely.
How could he not
have
no,
a sense. Yeah, he's got to have at least a little bit of a sense.
I mean, they say we have no faith in Ukraine, and Friedman's next question is why? Isn't why? It has to be why, right?
Well, they could, but they could be vague. They could choose to be vague. The other interesting thing is, did the administration choose to leak this? Right? Did the administration want to send the message to Zelensky? We're going to start complaining about you if you don't start doing something we want you to do.
How about?
I mean, Tom Friedman, where would you rather leak something? I mean, that's perfect.
Right. How about this? How about if you don't start doing something we want you to do, or we're going to piss off the Chinese so much that they're going to arm the Russians? We have Nancy Pelosi.
And we delivered.
Ready.
We delivered. We've already made good on our threat.
Right. Well, that's all the boring foreign policy stuff. Now we got to go to the exciting domestic stuff.
Well, is Kansas a game changer?
Well,
we're talking, of course, about
the broader
referendum
issue.
On
the
abortion.
broader issue of are the Republicans blowing the midterms? And I think you'd have to say the answer is yes, as predicted on the show, I believe. But that was just paranoia. Now it seems to be gaining realistic shape. I mean, if you look at the Republican ads around the country, they're all about inflation. Inflation. Okay? Inflation may be going down. I mean, there's one Fed indicator says it's going down. The Elon Musk says it's going down.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the job numbers are terrific. I mean, the most plausible scenario where inflation is still a problem is if the Fed takes Jason Furman and Larry Summers' advice and doesn't let fear of joblessness inhibit it from killing inflation dead, then they would say these good job numbers are indication that there is still a tight labor market that might produce, and they're good wage numbers too, might indicate that there's still a wage price spiral going on, and the Fed has to clamp down. So they won't have inflation, they'll have a recession. That's bad for the Democrats' prospects too. So it looks like they may be putting all their eggs in the economy basket, and the economy may be looking a lot better by November, which will be good for the Democrats. Then there is this thing in Kansas where you can't. This was predicted that road disappearing would be a huge boost to the Democrats, because people would realize that the only way to preserve abortion rights is to go to the polls. They do seem to have realized that in Kansas, and the only sugarcoating I can see for the Republicans is they were really voting about abortion. They weren't necessarily voting for Democrats. So there were rumors that a lot of people went into the polling booth, they voted against the anti-abortion initiative, and then they just left without voting for any of the other Democrats, okay? They were single issue pro-abortion voters, and they didn't care about the Democrats either. So it doesn't. This turnout doesn't necessarily translate into votes for your local Democratic congressman, unless the Democrats do one more step to tie the election into the issue of abortion.
You want to hear that step being made?
Sure.
Here it is. Tweet from Chris Murphy, Senator Chris Murphy. Quote, mark my words, the anti-choice movement is going to look at the Kansas result and decide that their best path to criminalize abortion is a federal ban. It's coming, and that's what's on the ballot this November. So that's going to be
that's his attempt to do that. But the challenge for the Republicans, which they will probably fail to meet, is to tell the pro-life forces, don't do that. And you're part of our coalition, but you really got to back off now and not.
In other words, don't make a lot of noise about
absolutely.
A federal initiative.
Don't put anything on any ballot anywhere, and don't bring anything up in Congress that you push with any degree of salience, realizing that the media is going to try to make a big deal of it if you do, and just cool it for a while and let the pro-abortion winds blow themselves out, and then you have to start pushing things that are popular, like a 15-week ban on abortion, not a total
maybe
ban on abortion.
Given the way the Democrats are funding Trumpist candidates in Republican primaries, maybe the Democrats will fund Republican groups to put these things on the ballot and so on.
That's an interesting theory, that the Democrats will start funding pro-life groups.
Well, it'd be consistent with this
It's
other
a level
thing,
of paranoia that even I didn't descend to.
Yeah, I don't approve of that whole approach personally, but
well, it's interesting. It's definitely, I guess, it's definitely the after Hitler uns calculation that.
Wait. The after Hitler,
supposedly the left in Germany said, well, we'll let this guy Hitler come in because after Hitler we'll take power once Hitler fucks up. That was a miscalculation. In fact, perhaps the greatest miscalculation of the 20th century. So we'll support this guy taking out Major in Michigan because he has no chance of winning. But what if he wins? Then they're making a bet.
Be careful what you wish for.
As Jamie Raskin says, he has dirty hands. Can't be too pristine about these things.
Who has dirty hands? He says who.
There's a famous Sartre play called Dirty Hands, which is a very good play about how the communists have to make all sorts of sordid deals with bad people, I think maybe including fascists, to achieve power, and that's life as a moral person in the world is you have to have dirty hands. So they ask all these Democrats on the January 6th committee, all these self-righteous people who said democracy is at stake, should the Democrats be funding these election deniers who are this mortal threat to democracy? And they all said, no, that would be terrible. No, that would be terrible, until they got to Jamie Raskin, who said, well, as Sartre said, you got to have dirty hands. So maybe we should. That would be an interesting step. I did the math, Bob. I went the extra step.
All right, let me just say for our podcast listeners, Mickey has a tablet that has numbers on it that are apparently in his handwriting.
I went and I did the numbers of the total votes in Kansas. There were 915,000 people who voted for or against the abortion proposal.
Mm-hmm.
But in the governor's races, there were only 736,000 votes. So that's a huge drop-off. That's like over almost 200,000 drop-off of people who cared about the abortion thing, and it did not translate into support for either the Democratic or Republican candidates, perhaps because there weren't wildly exciting races.
Right.
But if that same thing happens in November, then this abortion thing isn't as big a deal for the Democrats as they think now.
No. So it does become the job of the Democratic Party to connect the two, as you said.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And then there's the filer faster principle, which is we forget about these things quickly. And now it looks like it's all abortion. But in a month from now, even a month from now, it may look very different. There'll be something else people are worried about.
I mean, this also, though, has practical consequence, right? Because this means that a lot of women around Kansas who want abortions will have a place to go who would not otherwise have, right? Like in nearby states as well as in Kansas.
There was some theorizing that Kansas could be like the California of the Midwest. That seems a little far-fetched, but it's possible because they now Roe versus Wade is now good law in Kansas, even if it's not good law anywhere else. But that could happen to any number of liberal states.
Mm-hmm. Of course, Colorado. But it's got Nebraska.
I don't think it's that big a deal. I don't think there are hundreds of thousands of women who are going to travel for that. But maybe I'm wrong.
But it looks like on three sides, it does have states that probably will make it hard to get an abortion, and Colorado being the exception on the fourth side.
Anyway, so it's I was trying to figure out if the Democrats might have a dense pack problem. In other words, they have so many good issues coming in that they cancel each other out because you can't talk about both abortion and the revival of Build Back Better and inflation coming down, and the good jobs numbers at once. Too much good news for the Democrats.
I don't think we have to worry. Right. I don't think we have to worry about that. Has the last couple of weeks gotten you to revise your estimates of anything in November? Are you now thinking that the Democrats taking the Senate is just?
I was worried. If you remember the podcast either 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I was despairing about the Democrats resurging. So it's nothing new for me.
Meaning you thought it was going to happen.
Yeah, it was a distinct possibility. I mean, the idea that Kevin McCarthy is this great genius who's going to steer his party to a majority is insane. He's universally recognized as slightly dumb. I've been worried about this for weeks, and it's coming to fruition. So yeah, I think it's a real possibility. I think that, I lived through the Newt Gingrich 1998 election when the Democrats were going to lose seats because Clinton was impeached and there was all this scandal, and and in fact the Democrats gained seats and Gingrich lost his job. I think Gingrich was probably expecting to be in control of the Congress then. Maybe not. He was in control of the Congress. He just got a smaller lead. But it was a big, unexpected defeat. I remember going to one of the editors at Newsweek, where I was working at the time, saying, I think the Republicans might do really badly in this midterms. Because I had somebody who had some source in Gingrich's office, and the editor said, classic Newsweek statement, well, I don't know, but it'll be exciting to cover it when it happens. you fucking idiot. Don't you want to get ahead of the curve and tell people it's going to happen? Anyway.
Risk aversion has its place in journalism. So do you think...
that's not risk aversion. That's wanting to be right, not wanting to be right too soon, wanting to be right at the exact time when everybody else is right.
Maybe he was afraid you were wrong, and you'd go out on a limb and look dumb.
But he'd be afraid if I was right too. That's the point.
In the end, what does it
matter? Being right
has
no payoff for Newsweek.
What does it matter whether they were Hitler's diaries, authentic or not? What was the line when they published Hitler's non-diary diaries? What did they say?
I've quoted it so many times that I forget what the exact wording is.
But as publication date approaches,
in the end, it may not matter as much as what the Hitler diaries tell us about ourselves and our society.
Right, but if these aren't the Hitler diaries, anyway. Not Newsweek's finest.
In the end, it matters little whether it's the same thing as Charles Murray's cop out. In the end, it matters little whether the carried interest loophole is revoked or not.
Speaking of the carried interest loophole, is that relevant to the whole Manchin cinema? So one thing that's happened since we during our 2-week hiatus is Joe Manchin zagged again. And
well, you owe me an apology. You said I was wrong because I claimed that Manchin cared about taxing the rich. And you said, Mickey, you were wrong on that. And it turned out I was right on that, Bob.
Well, I think on any given day, whether you're right or wrong depends on what mood Manchin is in. Anyway, you're right now. You're right at the moment.
That's not the full-throated, groveling apology I expected.
I think you're barking up the wrong tree. Maybe in the Parrot Room. We'll see.
Never apologize. You and the right have a lot in common, Bob.
Never complain and never explain. And never apologize.
Anyway, so go ahead.
Well, let's just... Okay, so he came back on board with climate package and taxes, supporting some taxes on the rich and a climate package that the taxes pay for. And I guess he got something in return, something that'll screw up the environment in return, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, his basic thing is we encourage all forms of energy. So it encourages clean coal as well as nuclear energy, as well as fossil fuel energy, as well as green energy. And the idea is that the massive subsidies for green energy will win out, but there are these other subsidies. He also got allegedly a reform of the permitting process that, the larger context is he seemed to have bailed as of 2 weeks ago on a larger Build Back Better plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the Republicans have said, well, they were going to hold the CHIPS bill hostage as long as the Democrats were pursuing a larger Build Back Better plan. So as soon as the Republicans voted for the CHIPS bill irrevocably, sent it to Biden's desk, all of a sudden Manchin has this revelation, says, oh, I do want a bigger. So he totally double-crossed the Republicans. The Republicans are pissed off, okay? And they have nothing they can do about it, but they're pissed off. Manchin has a side deal to improve the permitting process for energy plans, which is most people think is incredibly over-convoluted. But the problem is that's not part of the reconciliation deal. So it needs 60 votes. The Republicans are so pissed off that they might not give Manchin his 60 votes for his side deal. So, yes, he did strike these side deals, but they may be a fool's bonus because he may not get them. I think there's mainly one pipeline in West Virginia he cares most about. I don't know if that's a separate deal or just would be under the permitting reform would go forward. But he may not get his West Virginia payoffs.
So anyway, assuming that listeners digested all of what you just said, which I certainly didn't,
it was incredibly clear.
Enter Kirsten or Kristen Sinema, depending on what her first name actually is. What is her first name? Kirsten?
I think it's Kirsten. Anyway, so this bill has a bunch of green subsidies, okay, for green cars and all sorts of green energy.
Yeah.
It has an extension of the Obamacare subsidy to make up for the initial miscalculation where they thought the healthcare was going to be affordable. No, it's not, so they have to subsidize it. And it has a corporate minimum tax of 15%. Okay? Sinema, they forgot to talk to Sinema, or they intentionally didn't talk to Sinema. Sinema comes in with a bunch of demands that are very reasonable. One, not reasonable in the sense of they're a good idea, but reasonable in the sense that they're meetable and they didn't torpedo the deal. One is don't get rid of the carried interest loophole.
Mm-hmm.
Now that that is a little more complicated than people think. Because during the Trump years, they extended the holding period for having these bonuses that hedge fund executives get, and that they somehow are magically, even though they're compensation, have magically become capital gains. The Trump bill extended it from 1 to 3 years. This just extended from 3 to 5 years. So it's not like there was no way around it for Wall Street. Okay, so it was not exactly 100% repeal anyway. And the second thing is there are theoretical problems which we can get into now or later, which is it really completely indefensible to treat these things as capital gains? I think it probably is, but Matt Iglesias, of all people, has come to their defense. So interesting argument for later. Anyway, Sinema's gotten rid of that. She's mitigated the effect of the 50% tax on manufacturing. Apparently it would heavily fall on manufacturing somehow because it overrides an expensing provision in the Trump tax bill. They somehow figured out how to restore parts of that, so allegedly it won't hit manufacturing as badly. And she has some money to deal with the drought. Boom, she's on board. It's going to pass. So whatever is in the bill, good or bad, I think will pass. The Republicans are sort of spinning in the wind at this point. And it will be a huge Biden victory, depending on how huge a victory you think it is. There are some obvious things, if you look under the hood, that aren't too pleasant. The Medicare is now allowed to negotiate with drug companies, but it turns out that Medicare doesn't have the monopsony power that I thought it had. In other words, it only has like 30% of the market for these drugs, although for certain drugs for the elderly, it has to have way more power than that, as being the only buyer. But just to make sure that they have the power, they now also have the power to impose an unjustified profit tax on drug companies that don't agree with their negotiating position. So it's not really a negotiation at all. It's like, we're negotiating with you, and by the way, I have power to tax you if you don't agree.
You mean Medicare itself can levy the Medicare administration during the negotiations?
I don't know who exactly levies it, but it's this big stick that doesn't exist in an ordinary negotiation. So it's not really a fair negotiation. So my worry was
That's the whole idea.
as a monopsonist, as a monopsonist, they can negotiate you down to too low a level. So they, each
low being what? You mean inhibiting innovation or something?
The marginal cost of each additional pill, which is basically nothing.
Well, yeah, but
if the drug companies give you nothing plus 1 cent, it's in their interest to cut that deal. But that won't pay for all the research and investment, the average cost. So they can negotiate you down to a level that's too low to justify your average cost, which is a suboptimal result. Mike Kinsley wrote a very good column on this, which I linked to. Basically, if marginal costs keep going down as they do for pills, nobody really knows what the fair price is. It has to be set by some sort of government decision of, we have to pay you enough to justify producing as many pills as we want to have. And there's a danger that this will go too far.
This is while things still have patent protection. I mean, once they're generic, you rely on the market. But until there are generics available.
Right. There's the argument of, is there too much patent protection, too little? That has a similar problem. Yeah. But so anyway, it's not quite what's being sold as. The second big problem is it's sold as this $300 billion deficit reduction. But the ACA subsidies, the subsidies for Obamacare, are only extended for 2 years. If you really had them for the whole 10 years, and the whole point of Manchin being Manchin was, fund these programs for the whole 10 years, they didn't do that. They used the same old gimmick where they funded it for only 2 years. If you fund it for 10 years, as is intended to do, they're not going to strand these Obamacare people after 2 years. It takes away half the deficit reduction.
Mm-hmm.
And the other half is clearly funding the IRS to the tune of $50 billion of enforcement so that they can extract more taxes that are owing, or just intimidate people into paying tax that aren't owed. And that this is going to get, have a huge payoff. Might have a huge payoff, might not. Who knows?
Yeah, that seems like a gamble. But 50 billion seems like a lot. I could get people to cough up a lot of money.
It's incredible. I thought that was a typo. I thought it was 50 million. No, it's 50 billion. That's a lot of IRS agents.
Yeah, I just buy them guns with that kind of money. They can just point them at people. So
they should be able to win the war in Ukraine and get people to pay their taxes with that kind of money.
Yeah. Wait, there was a question I was going to have for you, but it escaped. Maybe it'll come back to me.
So anyway, so that's, my line, I take a hard line, a perverse hard line on this, which is the bill seems basically okay. I mean, I would probably vote for it if I were in Congress. It's got these problems. Not really a deficit reduction bill. It's a spending bill, but it's a paid-for spending bill. So what the hell? It's let's give it a try for these drug price negotiations. If it's too much, we'll be able to see and change it. Fine. It's an experiment. It only applies to a few drugs. But even the problem is the Democrats had this big, huge Build Back Better bill. It was the New Deal. Biden was the new FDR. And it had a bunch of really crazy stuff in it. By my lies, it had the worst.
But Joe Manchin has swooped in and stripped that stuff away.
The worst. They've dropped the crazy stuff. The takeover of the daycare industry that even Matt Brunig had big problems with. I think there was a parental leave component. The worst was the child tax credit, which is a revival of the welfare system. Because
you're not in favor of the child tax credit?
It turns out I'm not on balance. And anyway, they've dropped the crazy stuff, but this good stuff that's still in the bill will pass. The Democrats will regain a majority, and then they'll do the crazy stuff. So even the good stuff is bad because it enables the Democrats to retain power and do the crazy shit they wanted to do all along. So that's Mickey's.
This is the full-blown Mickey paranoia scenario.
Correct.
So, I mean, the least you can say, I mean, I'd like to, I'd like to be able to help you out and point to some bad news for Biden. but the least you can say in the way of good news for Biden is that the stagflation scenario is not unfolding. I mean, right? I mean, today's jobs report was extremely strong. I mean, yes, continued inflation, but at least some of that is reflected in wages. It's not all just prices.
The stagflation isn't unfolding, but the Lawrence suburbs, as we talked about, the Lawrence suburbs, the Fed better crack down now, big time. With a huge rate, another huge rate increase, that scenario is still alive. The inflation is still out of control, and the Fed can't afford to let it out of the barn.
But the fact
that's Wall Street's reaction. Wall Street is saying now the Fed is really going to crack down.
Fine, but the fact that stagflation doesn't seem to be a problem means that the Fed can do that without inflicting nearly as much political pain for Biden as it would have if it had to drive us even more deeply into recession.
You would think, if you're worried about a wage price spiral, the job market remains healthy, don't you sort of have to crack down enough so that the job market gets a little unhealthy? I think you do.
Well, a little, but my point is better a little than a lot. I mean, if you got stagflation, you still got that's what we had in the early 80s. Stagflation, and the inflation was still high enough that the Fed continue to have to, try to beat it down, and that just inflicted huge pain.
I guess it's better to start from a high level than a low level. Yeah,
that's all I'm saying. Yeah. I have a question though. I remember the question I was going to ask you. I've been hearing like on the radio, we've had our second. This was before the recent good news. The round of news before that was we've had our second consecutive quarter of negative growth, and economists are debating whether we're in recession. I thought that was the definition of a recession: 2 consecutive quarters.
No, it
of
hasn't
negative
been
growth.
For a while. The Republicans were all saying that's the definition of a recession. It's a recession, and in fact, this debate has been going on for 20 years. They've given the definition of recession over to some panel, which takes a holistic view of the whole economy at many indicators. And they just decide whether to declare it a recession. And if the fact that Biden said this was not at all out of the, I remember this debate from like long before predating Biden. So it's all semantic. You want to call it a banana. A banana happens when there are 2 negative quarters of growth. We're in a banana. Okay,
let's call it that. That can be another signature of the Parrot Room, is that we call recessions bananas.
I think that the famous quote where Alfred Kahn said, we can't call it something, we'll call it a banana. I think that was about a recession, I think. Or maybe it was about inflation. Anyway, it was...
There's just something about your tropical shirt that adds luster to your saying, let's call it a banana. Those two just work together.
What can I say? We're going for synergy.
So, Mickey, we're about time's up. Time's up. We got to move to the Parrot Room.
Really? Okay, because we have an incendiary issue, which we have not addressed.
What is that?
Monkeypox, piggy parties, bathhouses.
That can wait for the Parrot Room.
Okay.
I worry that it could spread in the Parrot Room, but we'll see. Because, wild shit happens in the Parrot Room. That's one reason people go to patreon.com/Parrot Room to sign up, because of all the wild shit. Right?
I'll have to be fully clad in leather for the Parrot Room.
Don't give it away for free, Mickey. They got to pay to find out what you wear in the Parrot Room. That is when you wear anything. If you know what I'm saying, folks. It's pretty wild. Sometimes wilder.
Don't think I haven't thought of that. It worked for Putin.
What? You mean the horseback shot, or was it wilder than that?
I have this new bodybuilding system I'm pursuing, Bob.
How's it? Well, what's the key? Well,
it's called. I'm thinking of patenting. It's called Broga. It's like you do like weight training, strength, push-ups, weights, and then you immediately do some yoga.
Broga.
And
what does the BR stand for?
Bros. Weightlifting.
Doing yoga.
That's what I come up with. Anyway, it produces a sensation that you've pumped up your muscles, but you're sort of calm about it. It really works.
I see the difference.
I could make a fortune.
I was going to comment on the difference, but I wasn't sure whether I was imagining it. But now it's all falling into place.
But why?
You seem calmer yet stronger.
I do think somebody must already have thought of this, because they've combined with yoga with every other possible thing. So
Rogan.
combining it with weight training is the obvious thing to do. I'm sure that's what pro football players do. And,
Isn't Joe Rogan kind of broga?
Sounds like it.
He doesn't really lose his cool much. He's kind of chill, but he's like kind of macho. He'll kind of like bash your face in, but it's nothing personal.
He's a broga bro.
He's a broga Rogan.
There's a Joe Rogan point for the Parrot Room.
Oh, excellent. I'm going to write that down because that's a real revenue generator.
There's
Alex Jones. So Joe Rogan, Alex Jones, we got to talk about. Brittney Griner, we got to talk about.
Monkeypox, Bob, you got to write that down.
Monkeypox. Hope I don't forget to write that down because it sounds great.
There's a lot to be said about monkeypox.
We got a little more Jonah Goldberg trash talk, right? We'll leave him in suspense with his trash talk. But anyway, the Parrot Room commenters have spoken because they have been treated to an advanced viewing of the very podcast with you and me that Jonah Goldberg complained about.
You were supposed to post this for free in Blogging Heads. You're taking your sweet time about it. How long are you milking this thing for?
As long as possible. It'll probably go public next week. But meanwhile, one of the many benefits of being a Parrot Room patron is that you get to see this stuff. And the patrons have weighed in, and you've read their comments. I've read their comments, but we don't want to give them away. Got to say, there's a certain amount of support for our view. Wouldn't you say, Mickey?
I haven't read the comments completely. I'm a few days old, so maybe there was a surge of support for Jonah. There's that. There's the question of are the two Peter Thiel Senate candidates that are now officially made it to the general election and have a shot at winning, a pretty good shot, but not a more than 50% shot. Are they fascists or are they actually?
So it's Blake Masters and
JD Vance.
Now, do both of those deny that Trump lost the election, or just Blake Masters?
I think they both use as extreme language as they can get away with without quite saying that there was fraud in the election and the results was fraudulent. They might say, their election was stolen because anti-Trump forces gave a lot of money to Mark Zuckerberg, who turned out a lot of crazy votes for the Democrats. That doesn't say the Democrats didn't win. It just says the election was rigged. So you
deny that they
So you can say the election was rigged. That doesn't quite have the full stop the steal potency.
You deny that they are true election deniers.
I wouldn't deny it. I haven't looked at haven't looked at their comments with a microscope.
But they certainly are trying to leave the impression. They certainly are trying to exploit, harness, and in the process foster.
Because they have dirty hands,
belief
Bob,
that the election was stolen.
Just like Jamie Raskin, they have dirty hands.
Well, they do if they do this. They do if they do this.
But once you admit you have dirty hands, it's a slippery slope to hell for everybody.
No, but this truly is a red line. I mean, these people are creeps. If there
are no red lines. The whole point of dirty hands is there are no red lines.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not buying the dirty hands thing. That's
okay.
I
have a beef with your hero Chris Murphy.
Okay.
I have a defense of mansplaining. I love mansplaining. And there was all this story that like Facebook is in trouble. Have you followed that?
Oh, I want to talk about that. Okay. There's a revolution happening. It's the end of social media. It really is. There's something significant going on. And it's not just Facebook.
Don't give it away for free.
I'm not going to give it away for free, but this is big. This is big.
Okay.
The end of, this should be a book. The end of social media. I'm typing it out as if it were a book title.
I mean, even the successful social media companies like Instagram, which is part of Facebook, seem to be saying, oh, well, everything you like about this is going away. Sorry.
Yeah, well, both Facebook and Instagram are saying that. And and you're seeing signs of it on Twitter. And it amounts to it ceasing to be social media. Okay, have I been clear enough?
Good. Yes.
What else?
There's one little wrinkle on the midterms. It's very little. But
and also obnoxious use of the word agency of the week. I've got an example.
Okay. There's a why the hell isn't there a third party? A good question that Tim Miller, who's a guy I don't normally like, wrote a very good article about in The Bulwark, a publication I don't normally like. And we can talk about that. We can talk about Fetterman.
Okay.
There's Fetterman news. Fetterman is the Democratic candidate for Senate in Pennsylvania who looks like a blue-collar bouncer, but is he really blue-collar?
Well, no, we know he's not blue-collar. His father was reasonably affluent. We know that.
He went to Harvard.
Did he go there as an undergrad?
No. He got a master's degree.
Well, not the same. As you know, people like you who went there as an undergrad look down on people who merely have a master's degree from the Kennedy School?
That's not true. I'm a social egalitarian, Bob. You know that.
Well, since I briefly thought you said Federer, that reminds me of naturally golf. And maybe there's something new to say about I think there is something new to say about the LIV Tour and the antitrust suit being filed by some members of the LIV Tour against the PGA. Yeah. There's
definitely stuff, another point to be made about the midterm. So,
yeah. Okay. We got plenty. We got plenty. We should stop.
Okay.
Unless you got something super sexy. I mean, but it has to be like Jeffrey Epstein level.
I'm looking in the super sexy file. No. Okay. We'll go.
And are you going to unveil another tropical shirt? You're going to do a...
No, I think I'm going to... This tropical shirt I bought it in Hawaii like 20 years ago.
Should I unveil my new look? Should I unveil my new look? You're changing the subject. You're trying to keep me from raising this fascinating question. Should I unveil my new look in the Parrot Room?
If you have a new look, it's about time.
Oh, I have a totally new look. You're not going to believe it. No, seriously.
You actually cut the hair in the back of your head?
I don't want to say anymore. I just want to say, like, when you see the way I look at the beginning of the Parrot Room, you're going to say, where do I join this cult?
Does this involve hormone injections?
I don't want to give it away for free, Mickey. All I got to say is the magnetism that is going to be exerted and exuded by the Bob you're going to see when the Parrot Room starts is mind-blowing.
Are you changing your pronouns in your long gender journey?
Let's just say I'm not going to look like this, okay? And it's going to be closer to the real, authentic Bob.
You would make quite an attractive woman, actually.
Don't give it away for free, Mickey.
Okay.
You're not okay.
I'm not the first to say that.
Not the first to say that, but thank you.
Okay.
But thank you. Thank you anyway. Okay, so patreon.com/Parrot Room. And by the way, we should say that this is pretty much, although he may swoop in and help out when we need it, pretty much the last week that Mark Sussman is going to be doing the topic titling, helping us out with that. We should say thank you to Mark.
Thank you. It's weird. You get good feelings and bad feelings about seeing somebody's name in your email. Is this person going to help you, or is this person going to be trouble?
And he's a good vibe name.
He's a total good vibe name. I see his name. I think this is going to be a good experience. This isn't like my broker calling me up and saying, Mickey, you're in deep trouble.
Yeah. And it's not like
that I would have a broker.
Not like a Nigerian prince who wants money from you or anything. It's better than all of that.
Right.
And he's been great. But he's going on to bigger and better things. He's also, been a professor of Shakespearean literature or something in the city college system or the city university system in New York. Anyway, he has been teaching there, but is going on to grander things.
Like everything else, he's going on to podcasting.
Aren't we all? So we'll see people in the Parrot Room, including us. All right.
Oh, wait. Well, I should bring out the parrot.
You should.
Okay. I'll also think of a song.
And people will find out what that means in the Parrot